I'm Bob Short, and this is Reflections on Georgia Politics, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell Library at the University of Georgia and Young Harris College. Our guest today is longtime Executive Secretary to Senator Richard B. Russell of Georgia, and one of the founders of the Richard B. Russell Foundation here at the University of Georgia, Bill Jordan. Bill, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
You spent your early life in Monticello, Georgia. Tell us, if you will, about your early life.
Well, I'm a Southern boy, born and bred. I still eat dinner in the middle of the day. I haven't come far from my upbringing. My people have been in Jasper County for 200 years. My sister and I still own the farm that's been in our family for almost 200 years. And I'm very much a product of a small town in Georgia. Back in the 40s, and I left there in the 50s. But I had a wonderful childhood experience. I had all my 4 grandparents were living in this little town. My one grandfather was the largest farmer, peach farmer, in the state, 15,000 peach trees. My other grandfather started a bobbin mill that made wooden bobbins for the textile industry. And my mother and father, both of them from Monticello, and we lived there and spent my early years there before I went away to Darlington for my senior year in high school and later to the University of Georgia.
Mm-hmm. You graduated from law school at the university.
Yes.
Did you have any particular interest in any area of the law?
Yes, the drafting of it, the making of it. I never really had any interest in practicing law. I caught the political bug early. I campaigned for Columbus Roberts from back when he ran against Herman Talmadge. And I got infected with the political bug, and I always had an aspiration to make government more responsive to the people. And I must say that I ended my life trying to balance the federal budget, so you see what a total failure my life has been.
So what happened after law school?
Well, I didn't have much. I went back to Monticello and I practiced law for less than a year, and I had an obligation. I was had a commission, a reserve commission from ROTC, and I was called to active duty and went to Korea and came back to. I had opened an office in Monticello, but I didn't want to stay in Monticello. There were no girls there, and there was no law to practice, so I had to find some other way to put gas in my car, and it was very attractive then to be an FBI agent. A lot of boys just idolized FBI agents. They had the FBI story on television, and it was supposedly they picked only 1 in 113 people that applied. You had to be either a lawyer or a CPA to get into the FBI. So if they took you, you thought you had achieved something, and it was kind of a romantic thing. I still had the political bug, but I went through Quantico. They taught me to shoot. The Army never really did teach me to shoot, but I was a pretty good shot when I got through the FBI Academy. And the FBI at the time had had a way of mixing people up. They sent the boys from New York and Boston. They sent them to Mobile and Fort Worth, and they took the people from Monticello and Hayhira and sent them to New York and Chicago. They sent me to Chicago, and it was cold. and it was miserable. And we chased communists, and we chased criminals. Anyway, I cleaned up the crime in Chicago, and of course, for a couple of years, I didn't want to. The FBI was too regimented for me. They wanted to tell me to put my .38 in the second drawer down on the right, and I just wasn't cut out to be regimented that much. And so Senator Russell offered me a job in Washington, and I was delighted to take it.
When and how did you meet Senator Russell?
Well, I had gone to Darlington with his nephew, and I was best man at his wedding, and that's the way I first met Senator Russell. And I'm sure that when there was a vacancy on the senator's staff, that Richard Russell III recommended me, and he recalled having met me, and he was good enough to give me a job. It's interesting that at the time, this is 1951, the FBI paid more, I made more than any boy in my graduating class, even the ones that went to work for Gambrell, Holland, Barwick, Russell and Smith, or the Sanders Troutman firm, or any of the others. I made $5,500 a year. The ones that went to work for the big law firms made 42, 44, 46. And when I went to work in Washington, I made $6,000 a year. And Senator Russell made $12,000 a year. I made half of what the senator made. Times have certainly changed. We were clerks, and now they're chiefs of staff. There was a fellow named John Ellis, and he told a story about he went to work for Wyman Pilcher, and Pilcher was from South Georgia. And he went to Washington with Congressman Pilcher, and Congressman Pilcher went home. And John, having arrived in Washington a couple of months, he went in the congressman's office, put his feet up on the desk, got him a cigar, and was sitting there smoking it. Well, the congressman came back. He'd forgotten something. He found John in there with that big cigar with his feet on the desk. He knocked the feet out. He said, "John," he said, "I hired you to come here and hold the ladder while I climb the ladder to success. If I ever come in here and catch your foot on the bottom rung of it, I'm going to fire you." So John always remembered that. And Harry Dent, that was traveled South Carolina with Strom Thurmond when he was running for governor, and later on his staff in Washington. He used to tell the story about a man wanted to run for the Senate or the Congress, and he campaigns and he gets somebody to drive him around, and he gets elected, and he goes down to the train station, now the airport, and buys a ticket and flies to Washington. He gets sworn in. 2 months later, he wants to go home and see if they remember him. It takes 3 staff men and 2 secretaries to get him on the plane. And it's probably worse than that today.
What were your duties with Senator Russell?
Well, we didn't specialize like they had. I went to see Senator Chambliss, tried to see him back in the Obama inauguration, and I was never able to see his assistant scheduler, much less his scheduler, and certainly I didn't get to see the senator. We had a staff of 6 people, and I remember going to tell the senator that we needed to hire a 7th person, and he said, "Bill, if you hire any more, the staff is going to be running the senators." We didn't even have, senators didn't have press secretaries. Certainly Senator Russell didn't. He wrote his own speech. And so we were generalists. We did everything. And I remember telling somebody one time, they asked me what I did, and we had worked on the C-5A contract for Lockheed, and it had been successful. And the same month, somebody came up to Washington with the tufted textile association from Calhoun, and they were going to go to a masquerade party, and they wanted to have a donkey. And so it fell my task to try to find a donkey. And I found one. Wayne Morse had a donkey. And so I got the guy the donkey. So I did everything from getting a donkey to working on the multi-million-dollar C-5A contract.
We've heard a lot about Senator Russell and really about his private life. He never married. How did he spend his spare time? Did he have any hobbies?
No. Reading and work. And as a result, my work week when I was Senator Russell was probably more like 60 hours, including Saturdays, than any 40 hour. We never had a 40, and we didn't get any overtime then. That was, now they get overtime, I think. And but Senator Russell had never married. He was governor. He was a remarkable man. He was in a time when young people were not recognized at all. You didn't raise your voice until you were 35. He was Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives at 28, governor at 31. And that was most unusual. Some of Russell's time in the state, he followed Harry Byrd, who had had a reorganization in the state of Virginia, and to reorganize the government. And Russell had done that in Georgia, reduced the number of bureaus and agencies from about 210 down to 34 or something like that. And so he came to Washington, and it was during the Depression. And well, let me tell you first that how he campaigned. He went to 159 counties. He went to every county in the state, drove from one county to another. In a time when I understand it takes $5 million or more to run a campaign in Georgia, Senator Russell raised $7,000 to run for governor, and he borrowed $5,000 from the Bank of Barrow. And that's what he ran on. It's just hard to imagine the need for money, and later on I'd like to talk about the influence of money. But you asked me about Russell's private life. He was a lonely man, and that's the way Lyndon Johnson played to him. He and Lady Bird, they would invite him out to supper, and they had a cook. He could cook Southern cooking, and Johnson used that to ingratiate himself with Senator Russell. And he would eat down at the oyster place, and then and go on down. And he came to Washington during the Depression, and the Mayflower Hotel was in bankruptcy, and they were looking for somebody. And so they made Senator Russell a deal, let him have a large sleeping room with an anteroom. It wasn't a suite. It was kind of a big closet, and for $60 a month. And when I got, that was in the early 30s, and when I got there, they'd increased the cost of the room to about $300 a month, and Russell was rather penurious, and he couldn't stand to pay that much money. And Strom Thurmond had just bought him an apartment down in the Potomac Plaza, and Senator Russell was impressed with having owned Strom owning a apartment inside a building. So he sent me down there. He said, "Go down there and see if you can buy me one of those." I went down there, and I found a one-bedroom apartment. It was $32,000. And I went back. I told him. He said, "Well," I said, "it's got a $14,000 loan on it at 4%. You could assume a loan then." "No, I don't want to get in debt. I don't want to get in debt." I said, "Senator, you can get 6% at this." "I don't want to get in debt, Bill. I don't want to get in debt." So we negotiated for the. He had never. Yeah, he did go down there one time and looked at it. it had a lumpy bed in there. Some fellow from the State Department had. He had 4 camel saddles. And he said, be sure you get all of that when you're ready. So our offer included the full the furnishings such as they were, and it was pitiful. But that's what he wanted, and we traded for the apartment. He paid cash for it, and he lived there till the time he died. He was fascinated. When I got back to Washington, when I got back up to the Capitol, he said, "Where's the deed?" I handed him the paper. It was a condominium agreement. He said, "What's this?" I said, "It's a condominium agreement." "Bill, that's mighty weak paper for all that money." But he stayed in the Potomac Plaza until he had it the time he died. But in answer to your question, he was a lonely man, and reading was his passion, and he was totally devoted to his work. That's the reason that he had several girlfriends when he governor, but that's the reason that he just no woman wanted to take part in that kind of the kind of life he led.
He was a powerful man, and despite his strength and his reputation, he turned down leadership positions in the Senate several times. For example, he refused to accept the nomination as majority leader
several times,
on several occasions.
Because he couldn't maintain his loyalty to the South and the things that the South wanted at the time, and serve the president. It was just impossible. It was the Southern bloc of, what were they, 18 members were a very distinct body within the Senate. And it's true that they were probably more like Republicans than they were like liberal Democrats. Certainly, Senator Russell was more like Senator Taft than he was like Senator Douglas of Illinois, or Hubert Humphrey. And so he couldn't maintain. He felt that he couldn't do his job as senator from Georgia, and then serve the president and serve the national interest, because our interests at the time, as we saw them, were very special and very different.
Mm-hmm. I know you, Bill, you were not on his staff in 1952. That's the year he ran for president. Did he really want to be president, or did he run just to stake out the Southern position?
Well, I wasn't there, and I don't know, but I'm certain in my mind. Well, you ask, did he want to be president? I think any United States senator wants to be president because he thinks he can do a better job than the man that's down there, and it does every governor. But I'm sure Senator Russell was realistic enough to know that his provincial, and they were provincial interests, would not permit him to get elected. He wouldn't allow him to get elected. So I'm sure he was a stalking horse for the South. Mm. And he got every Southern vote from Texas to Virginia in the convention.
I think General Eisenhower was elected that year. What was Senator Russell's relationship with President Eisenhower?
Very good. Russell had gone around the world. They had a senatorial group that investigated the World War II effort, and they went to all the battlefronts, and Senator Russell had met General Eisenhower then, and they had a very comfortable, it wasn't a warm relationship, but it was a comfortable relationship. And they had mutual respect for each other.
Before I forget it, I would like to get you, if you will, to define Senator Russell's political philosophy.
Well, the two words that I've always used to describe Senator Russell is ability and integrity. And I think those two adjectives best describe Senator Russell. He was a man that was totally honest He was there for 41 years. No one ever challenged his honesty, his veracity. He said they might take him out of the Senate on a stretcher, but when they took him out, he would carry his honor with him, and he certainly did that, and he would never question. He was, I don't know, he wasn't a companionable man. There was an article in the paper about John Kennedy walking down the beach, I guess in Hyannisport, and some fellow was walking there, and he said to President Kennedy, "And Dick Russell told me such and such and so and so." And Senator Kennedy looked at him and he said, "You know," he said, "I've known and served with Senator Russell for 6 years, but I've never felt that I could call him Dick Russell." And Russell was a senator's senator.
Respect.
And had very, very, not support, but he was very liked by his colleagues, respected by his colleagues.
Right. Well, he was ever the spokesman for the American farmer and strong on defense. What were some of his other passions?
Well, let me tell you, we're strong on agriculture. I realized that there was not a we had all different kind of trees on the Capitol grounds, but we didn't have a pine tree, and I realized it, and Ray Shirley was the state forester, and so I got Ray, I told him we needed a pine tree, and I got permission from the architect of the Capitol then. Russell could have most anything he wanted, and Ray Shirley sent a pine tree up there, and Senator Russell planted it and got good press planting a pine tree. And I stayed behind and got my picture made with the pine tree. It's now about 30 feet tall. It's a loblolly and not adjusted to the Washington climate, so it hadn't thrived, but it is still there. And Senator Chambliss's staff has said that they'll look after it, and you can see it out of his window. And so we planted a pine tree on the Capitol grounds. Senator Russell was never chairman of the Agriculture Committee, but he was always the ranking member, and when I knew him. And I think if he had to choose between the two, he would have chosen the Agriculture Committee, because that Georgia was an agricultural state.
Mm-hmm. He's been given credit for helping many young senators who came to Washington, and is given credit for the rise of Lyndon Johnson from a mere senator to President of the United States. Would you describe that relationship for us?
Senator Russell never married, he never had a son, and all of us look for someone to carry on after we go on, and Johnson came over there and ingratiated himself. I think that's a good word, ingratiated himself with Russell. He set out to do it. Russell was the controlling member of the Senate. It was the most prominent. He had more to do with the committee assignments than anyone else. He knew the rules better than anybody else. And so Johnson set out to make himself Russell's man, and did a good job. And Russell, Lady Bird, had a good cook from Texas, and she cooked green beans with fatback and biscuit, and they were in short supply in Washington. And so when Senator Russell would get invited out to the Johnsons for Sunday brunch, he generally accepted, and he didn't accept anybody else's invitations. I was telling you earlier about when Kennedy was inaugurated, and and appointed Dean Rusk as the Secretary of State. And Rusk wanted to have Russell. Russell was the ranking man on the Appropriations Committee, so it was natural that he would want to have Russell to come down to the Department of State for dinner, middle of the day, lunch. And he would call, and Russell would put him off and say, "I'm busy, I can't come, I can do it." It went on 5 or 6 times. Finally, he said, "Well, I'll go down there. I'll go down there." Stop him from calling. And so Senator Russell went down to the Department of State and had lunch. And came back, and he was shaking his head. So I see why it's such a mess down there. I see why where our problem is. I said, "What's that, Senator?" He said, "They're down there drinking in the middle of the day." And in Georgia at the time, there were very few places in Atlanta that you could get a drink or be seen with a drink in the middle of the day. Southern men might drink, but they drank at night. My dad used to say after bull bat time, when the bull bats come, you can drink, but not during the day.
Bill, let's move ahead to 1960, the year Senator Johnson was on the John Kennedy ticket as the Democratic candidate for vice president. Do you know if he talked to Senator Russell about leaving the Senate? And did Senator Russell want him to run for vice president?
I don't know, but I would speculate not. Johnson surprised everybody, including Bobby Kennedy. That came as almost an explosion. People couldn't believe that Lyndon Johnson would leave the Senate in order to become vice president, because it was a step down in most people's estimation. And I'm sure that Senator Russell, having cultivated him and brought him on, and thought that he had inculcated him with some of his ideas. He didn't, but he thought he did. I would guess that he would not have preferred that he ran. He was not active in the campaign.
Well, those of us who came through the ranks here in Georgia recall that Senator Russell was never very active in presidential politics. But he did go to Texas for the Kennedy-Johnson ticket, I think, in that year.
He made one appearance, yes.
And that was a result of, how did that come about?
I don't know. Russell, he didn't get involved in other people's campaign. When his nephew-in-law, Ernie Vandiver, who was running for governor, he tried to get the senator to come in, and senator endorsed him, but I think he made one appearance with Ernie at Gainesville, is my recollection, and he just didn't get involved with others, and it's probably a pretty good idea.
There was an incident in Texas, in Dallas, in the Adolphus Hotel that some people believe infuriated Senator Russell and got him down there. Is there any truth to that?
I think it was. I think Lady Bird was insulted by some man, and in a way, not in a physical way, but in a verbally had to do with her, and that's when Senator Russell acquiesced to go there and make an appearance with Senator Johnson.
Were you involved in that campaign?
Yes, I was 34 years old, I guess, and I had known Senator Kennedy casually, and I admired him. He was young. He was all of us that were young kind of identified with him. He had a pretty wife and a young family, and he was a very attractive man. John Kennedy was attractive. He was attractive to men, he was attractive to women, he was a war hero. He was a congenial kind of a guy, and we thought he should be president. I was flattered when he selected Johnson, and Johnson asked for me, Russell volunteered me, with the staff members could work in presidential campaigns at that time, and Senator Russell was in Europe inspecting military bases, I think, but his token contribution to the Kennedy campaign was Bill Bates and me, who he contributed to the campaign. But I was caught up in it. I was very enthusiastic for Senator Kennedy, and went around about the country and
advanced man.
Advanced man. That was the first time. Now they have. I understand President Obama went to India with 400 people, but then it was very different. I had a photograph here somewhere of Senator Kennedy and Senator Johnson getting off the airport at Wichita Falls, Kansas. I had set it up, and when they wanted to make a TV clip, because Texas was sliding away, and Johnson was embarrassed that he had to ask Kennedy to come there, and so Johnson said, "Let's go over here. I've got a camera, and we'll make it in the office of the commander of the air base." And so we had to go through this crowd of about 30,000 people. And so when we swung off of the platform, we had about 4 or 5 Texas Rangers. They were big guys. I was there. And we had to hold the crowd back because they moved in. It was really a dangerous situation because the press of all those people, you just saw what happened in Laos when on the bridge, 300 of them got crushed. You can get crushed in a situation like that. But we were holding the crowd back and trying to move them through the crowd. And at night, I had holes in my shoe where ladies, the heel, they wore high heels then, had actually cut through my shoe. It was a dangerous situation. But what I'm trying to say is campaigns were so different then. You can't imagine. You had to get the microphone. You had to decide who was going to be on the platform, and it was. And Johnson was a tough taskmaster. He decided that the podium had to be, I think it was 53 inches. I've forgotten, but 53 inches, say, at the belly button. And if it wasn't 53 inches at the belly button on the back side, you'd hear about it. So I went through getting ragged on about in Richmond and Atlanta and Winston-Salem, and 4 or 5 places that I had set up. And so I was in Wichita Falls 10 days before the election, and I was determined to have it right. So they asked what I needed, and I said I needed a place. They didn't have one. So we got one, and from a church. And the man at the air base sawed off heightened it or whatever he did to make it qualify. And the minister from that church was going to give the invocation. He raised his head and looked down, and he saw I got the Democratic Committee to make a contribution to the church to buy a new one. But Johnson was a tough taskmaster. It's beyond my comprehension what happens now in presidential campaigns. When Johnson was president, 4 years later, when he ran for, he asked Russell for me to come back and work in the campaign. It wasn't it was interesting. He said, "Bill's the only one that goes out there and doesn't get drunk." Said all the rest of them go out there and get drunk, and you can't even get them on the telephone. And you can get Bill. So I set up Memphis. I said I'd go to Memphis and set it up if they would not send but 2 people. They always sent so many people. Richmond, he sent somebody was a chief of highway patrol in Kentucky, I think, and a lady lawyer from Washington, and he had everybody represented, so every side he was. But I told him I'd set up Memphis if he'd let me pick one guy, a friend of mine, and from Memphis, and we went to Memphis and set it up. It was going to be the opening. It was going to be his focus on his campaign to tame the rivers and to build the dikes and restore the farmland, and his environmental speech. And we set it up on the banks of the Mississippi, and the people back on the bank, and the speaking platform down at the bottom. And we had, I think the governor claimed we had 50,000. He probably had 25 or 30,000. It was a big crowd. And Johnson was always late and never on time. And so the crowd was restive, and if you wanted to have a good showing, you had the crowd there, and you want the thing to move along smoothly. Well, Johnson came in with his entourage and the Secret Service, and they pulled up, and they had a little trolley, not trolley, little, what do you call the room? Pulled behind a house, what do you call it?
Trailer?
Trailer, he had a trailer out there so that the president could refresh himself. And Johnson was a man of those years in which he needed to make a stop. And so the crowd was restive. He was about 35, 40 minutes late. It pulled up there, and he went into the little trailer. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I don't know. It's too long. He didn't show, and I was concerned, and I went to the door. And here was the President of the United States. He was sitting like this. There was a 3-star admiral on his knees, crawling around on the floor. Teleprompters had just come in, and Johnson had to see the teleprompter, and he had his contact lenses, and he dropped them. And the admiral was supposed to, I guess he was a medical doctor, I don't know, but he was crawling. And Johnson, you blankety blank, how you ever got to be an admiral? How did you ever get to be an admiral? You can't keep up with contact lenses. And the man was red in the face. But anyway, now they have a staff of people to look after those things. But then we had to worry about whether the contact lenses were there and the podium was the right level.
Mm-hmm. After President Kennedy's assassination, and Senator Johnson became, Vice President Johnson became president, he appointed what became known as the Warren Commission. He asked Senator Russell to serve on that commission. We heard at the time that Senator Russell was not very interested in that. Can you tell us about that?
No, he wasn't. He wouldn't answer the telephone when the president would call him, and but Johnson was a unusually persistent man, and he made it a question of Russell's patriotism, and so he eventually won out. But Russell was a very reluctant member, not an enthusiastic member. He had some. I think he put the only caveat in the Warren Commission report that while the commission found that Oswald acted alone, that there was no way to prove conclusively at that time that he had. It just wasn't absolutely certain, but and I think Russell thought that he acted alone, but he realized that they couldn't be 100% sure that there wasn't other people involved.
Bill, despite what was seemingly a father-son relationship, as you mentioned, Senator Russell and President Johnson sort of drifted further and further apart over the years. Was there one incident or one disagreement that caused that?
Well, you asked me that question in just a minute. I want to go back to the campaign just for a minute. if we talk about the differences in campaigns today, with 400 people going to the press plane, now they have 2 or 3 press planes. We people that set up the meeting, if we did a good job, we got asked to return to Washington on the president's plane with the presidential part. If you didn't do a good job, you had to get your train ticket back or your plane ticket back, get back as best you could. I apparently did a good job. I was in New England, and I set up a stop in New Hampshire. What's the capital of New Hampshire? Nashua? I don't know. We set it up, and I must have had a good crowd, had done a good job, because they asked me. We were flying on to Rhode Island, and Bill Moyers was there, and I got on the plane, and he said, Bill, have you had anything to eat? I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, the staff shared, tell them what you want. I said, what you got? And they said, well, we're going to land in a few minutes. How about a shrimp cocktail? I said, fine, I'd like a shrimp cocktail. Well, I had shrimp cocktail. And about a week later, after I got back home, I got a bill from the James U. Cross, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Air Force, Armed Forces Aide to the President, 23 August 1966. Request reimbursement in the amount of $1.25 as follows. Flight from Manchester, New Hampshire to Burlington, Vermont, lunch, $1.25. Yeah, I framed the bill and I framed my check. I paid it, $1.25. But after he was elected president, several months later, my wife called me, the office, and said, Bill, she said, there's a presidential limousine had pulled up in front of my house, and this uniformed chauffeur had come to the door and delivered a package with a big official United States presidential seal on it to you. He said, can I open it? I said, oh, no, don't open it. I said, I think it's my appointment to the Court of St. James or something for all I've done for him. And we went, I got home that night, and she wanted to open it, and I said, no, let's have supper. And we built a fire. I said, oh, he's going to open this present. He finally acknowledged what I did for him. And we broke open the seal and opened it up. And it was a flight certificate. This is to certify that William Jordan has flown on a presidential jet. So Johnson realized that that people like to have some token, and he was always giving out. He gave out his grandfather's knife hundreds of times. I'd pull it out of his pocket. I like you so much, and I want you to have my grandpa's knife. He was always had some little token, and it was good politics. Now you back to your question. I'm sorry.
Back to the drifting apart of what had been as you described, a father-son relationship between Senator Russell and President Johnson. Any one incident, or was it just a series of
There was a series of incidents, but the one that broke the Campbell's back was the appointment of Alec Lawrence, a longtime friend of Senator Russell's and a very, very able lawyer from Savannah, to a federal judgeship. And the Attorney General had raised some question about it and had held it up for months, and Johnson and Russell was not accustomed to having his recommendation. Then a senator recommended, and the president generally appointed people that the senator selected from a state to be a federal district judge or census, chief of census, or the United States attorney. Those were senatorial appointments, considered to be, and so it was very unusual. Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General, and Ramsey Clark had his own agenda, and it was closely identified with the president's, of course, and he didn't think that Alec Lawrence would serve the president's interests, so he held it up, and finally Russell reached the limit of his patience and wrote a rather terse letter to the president that I've never seen. President Johnson opened it, read it, and wouldn't accept it, and sent it back. And what become of it, I don't know. But it was the relationship was never the same after that.
So that letter was never in the official record?
No.
Let's talk about some of the other issues. Senator Russell was never in favor of Vietnam. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
President Johnson asked him for his advice on many occasions, and every time Senator Russell explained to the president that the consequences of a military buildup in Vietnam.
Well, it was a traditional view, military and otherwise, that you shouldn't get involved on the continent of Asia because of the land mass and because of the population centers. It was just an impossible thing to wage war on the Asian continent for a European or North American power. And Russell saw that, and he was opposed to it.
As I told you earlier, I read the other day where in 1962, Senator Russell predicted that China would become a major world power. He was a very intellectual person, wasn't he?
Well, he's very prescient. I think prescient's the word about those things. He started the Georgia Waterways Commission back when he realized that water was going to become an issue. I almost scoffed at it because I was from Monticello. We had all the water we needed. The water bill was about between $3 and $5 a month. We watered the grass. We let the water run, and we just didn't consider water to be anything to be revered or concerned about. But Senator Russell had seen it in the West and realized it would happen here, and now we have a desperate situation with in the search for water for the metropolitan Atlanta. And he organized the Georgia Waterways Commission. Jim Woodruff from Columbus was the chairman of it, and it studied the water problem, the resources, and the supply, and the Corps of Engineers handled it, and they made a report and recommendations back in the middle 70s, I guess.
He was also responsible for the appropriation for the creation of Lake Lanier.
Yes, indeed.
And also I believe, a dam on the Savannah River.
The Walter George and the what's now the Strom Thurmond Lake, I think it is, Clark Hill.
Clark Hill, yeah. It's I think we call it Lake Russell on our side. A man of Senator Russell's power and stature in the Senate, I'm sure, got attention from a lot of lobbyists. How did he deal with that?
Senator Russell got attention from a lot of lobbyists?
Yeah, I'm sure they called on him for various reasons.
They very seldom ever saw him.
That's the answer I'm looking for.
Well, it was. There was a man from Georgia that represented the International Paper Company, and he had some political connections. Some of his relatives in Georgia. And I remember him coming and delivering a gift to the senator, which I followed our general procedure, and I sent it back. It was Senator Russell at the end of a day would pour him a drink of Jack Daniel's Black Label. Senator Russell bought it was Green Label, but if somebody, his family members, somebody gave him to him, it was Black Label, and it was a case of Jack Daniel's Black Label. And I sent it back, and I remember the guy that told him from the whiskey store, I told him to take it back, get it out of here. He said, "Boss, I've been coming here for many years, so I ain't never taken no whiskey back." But
Yeah.
no, we didn't. We didn't accept gifts from lobbyists. Small token, a cake or something on Christmas, but nothing of value. Senator Russell was impeccably honest. He was also penurious. He had the small. He paid less than any other member of the Senate on his staff. He could set the salary levels, and we were at the bottom of the level all the way. It was just he just didn't believe in big salaries. He gave me a raise. I think after I got married, he gave me a raise of $100 a month, and he told me I would not have to be so penurious anymore. Senator Russell was rather penurious, and after his funeral, I told the story, and I might tell it again because it's interesting to me how times have changed. Senator Russell would get involved on the floor of the Senate, and sometimes dinner time lunch would pass, and it'd be 2 or 2:30, and he would start back, and the restaurant would be closed, and he would stop down in the basement of the Senate office building at the machine and get him a pack of crackers and a Coca-Cola. I was in his office one day. I was standing at his desk, and he came in and slammed the door rather hard. "I've been a damn fool all these years." Well, the senator wasn't one to brag, but he wasn't one to cut himself down. No, senators don't demean themselves, generally speaking. "I've been a damn fool." Oh, it surprised me. I looked up, I said, "Senator," I said, "how's that, Senator?" He said, "Well, you know," he said, "I come back, I get involved on the floor of the Senate, and I come back and I go down." I said, "Yeah, I've seen you do that." Well, today I didn't have a dime. I had a nickel. And I bought a nickel pack of crackers. He said, "Bill, do you know that you get 4 crackers for a nickel and 6 for a dime? Can you think of the money I've lost all these years?" Now, can you imagine a United States senator being conscious of how many crackers were in them? But that was the way it was. We tried to be frugal.
Bill, before we get into your joining the Senate Appropriations Committee, I'd like to ask you a couple of political questions about Senator Russell. Do you think if Senator Russell were with us today that he'd still be a Democrat?
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't think he would. But when Strom Thurmond left the Democratic Party, and Barry Goldwater was the candidate. Barry Goldwater was on the Appropriations Committee, and his views on most issues were in concert with Senator Russell's. And that's when Strom Thurmond was the first Southern senator to break ranks and go over. And I asked him, and he looked up at me rather sternly, and he said, "Bill, I'm a Democrat." And that was the end of the conversation. So I don't know at what point, but certainly Senator Russell's views today would not fit in with the President Obama's. No, I'm certain that political landscape is so changed that Senator Russell would be a Republican. The Southern Bloc was really in the control of the Senate for many years was with the Southern Bloc plus the Northern Republicans. Bob Taft and Senator Russell really, if you didn't have Taft and Russell with you, you didn't move legislation.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the Southern Bloc. Senator Eastland was a member.
Oh yeah. Eastland, Talmadge,
Stennis,
Harry Byrd, Sr., Russell Long, and every once in a while, when the political wind was right, Kefauver and Gore would come by briefly, and the senators from Texas were beginning to stray. Lyndon Johnson participated for many years, but as his presidential ambitions grew, he
became a Western senator
senator.
instead of a Southern senator. What would Senator Russell think about the partisan nature of the U.S. Senate today?
I'm sure Senator Russell would deplore it, as most everybody does, the days of foreign policy between Walter George and the Senator not McKellar, but from Michigan. We worked in harmony. Senator Russell and Senator Stoltenstall from Massachusetts were the chairman and ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, and they didn't have separate staffs. They had a single staff that served the entire committee. And it was just, the rancor wasn't there. The meanness, it was tough sometimes, but it wasn't mean like it is now. And it was, very often people broke ranks when they thought their constituency felt different about an issue. And now it's almost a rigid block. You vote with the party or you don't vote with the party. And if you don't vote with the party, there's a discipline.
Mm-hmm. What would be his view of the modern media? Do you think we'd be seeing him on Hannity and Combs or Chris Matthews or some of those national
If he needed to get his message, if he needed to get his message across, he would be there. But I'll tell you this. Senator Russell single-handedly kept the TV cameras out of the Senate for 8 or 10 years, and they didn't come in until he left. He realized, he felt, and I think it's true, that the senators would play to the galleries rather than speak to the legislation, and that's when we had blow-hair-dried senators. Is that what they call them? You know, you get a $300 haircut to be sure you look right.
How do you think the senator would feel about our current posture in the world? Do you think he would advise President Bush to invade Afghanistan?
No. I think Senator Russell was more like George Washington, that would have preferred to avoid foreign entanglements, and I agree with that. I think we would be better off. I thought we had learned our lesson at Mogadishu, or in Vietnam, or in Korea, where I served. That was our first, but it wasn't really our first. We got entangled in 2 world wars, but since then we've gotten involved at almost every turn, to our detriment.
You left the senator's office to join the Senate Appropriations Committee. How did that come about?
Well, I'd done most everything from run a state campaign to work in 2 presidential campaigns, and I read a book. A fellow by the name of Steve Horn wrote a book, the Senate Appropriations Committee, A Study in Unused Power. And I reflected on it, and I was always concerned about the federal deficit. And so I thought that that was something that I wanted to do and could make a contribution to it. I was foolish to think that I could, but that's how little sense I had at that time. And so I asked Senator Russell before the year before he became chairman. Senator Hayden, the chairman, was not in good health, and Russell was going to be the chairman, and I asked him to go to the Appropriations Committee, and he acquiesced. And he wanted me to go on the defense, work the defense subcommittee, but I wanted to start at the bottom and learn the real workings of the committee, and so I opted to work with Senator Robert Byrd, who was then the junior member of the committee. I was the junior member of the staff, and we had the District of Columbia Appropriations Committee. Senator Byrd was the chairman of that subcommittee for 12 years. He said he worked there longer than Jacob did for Leah, or whoever it was in the Bible that worked for his wife for many, many years. And anyway, that's where I learned the appropriations process, which is which is different. And I think at the time there wasn't an understanding. Certainly the Appropriations Committee was, in both houses, was the most powerful committee, because that's where the money came from. And generally the power goes with the money. And but it wasn't used the way it is. You had a request, an executive branch request or senatorial request that was considered by the subcommittee and the committee, and then there was a decision and a recommendation to the Senate. It wasn't all these little pockets and set-asides and earmarkings and what it's gotten down now into a real entanglement. Anyway, I wanted to work for the Appropriations Committee, and he let me go. And then the Treasurer would send up to the Appropriations Committee a statement, daily statement of the United States Treasury. So the day I started work on the Appropriations Committee was April the 22nd, 1968. The gross public debt at the beginning of the period, at the beginning of the day, $349,472,653,108.13. That was the gross public debt in 1968. Now committees have spend great amounts of money on backdrops and presentations. The Senate Appropriations Committee had no allowance for graphs. After 10 years on the committee, I wrote a letter to Senator McClellan outlining my views on the budget, appropriations. Senator McClellan was then the chairman. My idea of being fiscally responsible, and it showed the surplus and deficits of the government over that the period. We've all seen these graphs now, but I paid for the graph, $40 to have the graph made out of my pocket. And when President Reagan became president, he hired a man by the name of Stockton to be his budget director. And Stockman heard about my graph and sent up there, asked if he could use my graph, and I've got a picture here somewhere with the Washington Post of Stockman briefing Reagan with my $40 graph to show him how bad the situation was. But that was the beginning of my effort to tame the beast of make the federal government responsible. I was an absolute foolish to think that one man could make a difference, but I thought that I could, but I obviously did not.
Well, I want to get into that with you because I know you want to talk about it, but let's talk just for a minute more about the Appropriations Committee. I've often wondered how a senator who is not on the Appropriations Committee can get any money for his state. I'm sure that must be difficult.
Yeah. He goes to somebody on the Appropriations Committee and does it. But the thing is of having your earmarks was something fairly recent. It was just not done when I was there. It's maybe 6 or 8 a year for special purposes, but earmarks are something of recent vintage.
Yeah. Would that be floor amendments to the bill, to the appropriations bill? Could you amend it from the floor?
You could, but that's not the way they got in there.
Yeah. Well, how did they get in there? They had to come from the committee.
Well, you got a House and you got a Senate. And the House passes, the House originates appropriation bill, and then the Senate has an appropriation bill, and there is a conference committee. And the conference committee is a very little known but very powerful time. Carl Vinson was chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and House Armed Services Committee, Senator Russell of the Senate. And someone in the Washington Star wrote an article about what the conference committee was. And the conference committee would meet. They were appointed by the Appropriations Committee, the chairman of the House and the Senate, and they met and they ironed out the differences in the appropriations bill, or in this case, the Armed Services bill. And his conclusion was the conference committee would meet maybe at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They would wrangle on 3 or 4, 7, 8 o'clock, and telephone calls would come in from the wives, and we'd go into dinner at some embassy or somewhere, and they would leave and have to make their exit. And Senator Russell was a bachelor, and Congressman Vinson, for many years, his wife had died many years before, and so he was alone in Washington. And so he ended up by concluding that a conference committee was, in the case of armed services, were two old men waiting till everybody else left and then deciding what they were going to do. But in answer to your question, that's where the most of the things were done. A great many things were done that wasn't debated on the Senate floor.
Mm-hmm. What was your relationship with Senator Russell after you retired from the Senate? Did you stay in close contact?
With Senator Russell? Senator Russell was deceased by that time.
By the time you left public service?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Senator Russell died in '79, and I left in the early '80s. Senator Russell was in failing health. He had emphysema. He had been a smoker, and I didn't see as much of him, but sure, I saw him. He was chairman of the committee.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had mentioned to me that you were very interested in talking about some of the problems we have today with the economy and with our tax money. So let's do that now.
Well, no one knows what the contingent liability of the federal government is. I don't think the Budget Committee, the group that just studied the federal debt, was able to get a handle on it. I don't think anybody knows. It's in the trillions of dollars. Social Security used to be the big bugaboo. Medicare today is. The obligations of the federal government are beyond comprehension. We had a congressman from South Georgia. His name was Elijah Tick Forrester, and Tick Forrester would get up on the floor of the Congress and say, "Inflation, I'll tell you what it is. It's stealing from generations yet unborn." That's what it is. Theft from future generations, obligating them to pay for services and goods that they'll never see. And I was there and I saw it. And that's when I wrote the letter to Senator McClellan. And I continued to worry about it. It was consuming me. I was in Germany. Everybody knows about inflation in Germany in the early 20s after World War I. The mark had lost its purchasing power. So I sought for a way to demonstrate what I thought was going to happen. I was in Germany. I went into a stamp store. I said, let me see your, everybody knows about megaflation. What is your highest denomination stamp from that period? Oh, he says, I have a 5 million stamp. I bought it. 5 million marks. A mark traditionally was worth 40 US cents. But I was curious about what the day that it was German inflation was the worst. And I had a friend who was a retired Army officer and a CIA operative in Berlin, and he had hired Willy Bickel, who had been chief of the East German police, as his driver. I called my friend Jim Atwood. I said, Jim, would you send Willy Bickel down to the University of Berlin and find out the day that it was the worst? I think it was November the 18th, 1922. I'm not certain of that date. It was long about then. I said, would you go into a stamp store over there and buy me as many stamps as you can for that period? And he did. 1,622 stamps he bought. I think I paid 60 cents a piece for them. I have the original stamps. I had them photocopied, and I thought I could get my message across if I made it simple enough and small enough that a member of Congress could put in their pocket. And so I had them put them in plastic cards so they could carry it. And Buddy Darden was then a congressman, and I asked Buddy to distribute them for me. And I sent one to each member of the Congress, House and Senate. I know you can't see it, but there's a 50 million stamp, 50 billion marks. And what I said to the Congress was this German stamp was purchased in 1923 for 50 billion marks, the equivalent of 1 cent US. It was necessary to mail a simple postcard. Can the United States avoid the ravages of similar blue sky hyperinflation? If so, how? Bill Jordan, Rural Route 4, Box 2047, Monticello, a concerned citizen. And I came up with the wording that I put on the back: the doom of a profligate nation is certain, having been foretold by all recorded history. And I think that's true. I think no one has ever explained to me how we can avoid megaflation. At the time we were dealing with the graphs that I put out, back in the 70s, we could have dealt with it when we were dealing with a $348 billion deficit. But a $3 trillion deficit that we don't even know whether that's the beginning of it? There's no way in the world that we can handle it. It's just like the law of gravity. It's certain. An object unsupported falls. There are two ways to deal with the budget, with the deficit: stop spending or print money. Since we'll never stop spending, because we've seen what just happened in Europe when they increased the tuition in the schools, they took to the streets. We've seen what happens when you don't continue unemployment compensation for into the third year. People take to the streets. So we can't cut spending. So I have come to the conclusion, and no one can convince me that it won't happen, that we are right around the corner from the same thing that happened in post-World War I Germany. It's very sad to me. Here are pictures of the Germany with the wheelbarrows, and the billion-dollar marks and the riots. I wish that I thought there was something we could do about it, but I think the hole is so deep and so wide that it's beyond cure at this point. And there was a time when we could have done something about it, and we didn't. But governments never act. Almost never do governments act. Governments react. And we won't come to grips with it until it's too late. I feel sorry for future generations, for my grandchildren and your grandchildren and your children, because we, the people of my generation, and the generation before me, but primarily my generation, I can partially excuse myself because I go back, I'm a Depression baby, but certainly those that have come since know nothing about frugality, expenditures wisely, for crackers for a nickel, 6 for a dime. And so I think it's a very sad situation. I'm sorry to come to that conclusion, but that's what I believe will happen.
You're concerned about money as a corrupting influence.
Yes, I think beyond any doubt, the biggest problem in Washington is the insidious corrupting influence of money. What did we just read? That it cost $25, $30 million or something, I think $120 million for a senatorial campaign. Like most staff people, I think I've got the answer. I think I've had the answer. I think there is an answer to that question. I think that can be dealt with. The airwaves belong to the people, just like running water belongs to the people. Airwaves belong to the people. We license television stations. It used to be when I was a boy that so many hours, a couple of hours a month, were dedicated, had to be given to Smokey Bear or Eat Right or something like that. And we levied on the TV stations. There's no reason in the world why we can't. The cost of campaigning is probably 70–80% the cost of airtime. And there's no reason in the world, and no one has ever been able to tell me why we can't, in connection with the licensing of a TV station, require that station to contribute so many hours of public service time. And we can't allocate that time that belongs to the people free to the people that are running for public office and eliminate the cost, awful cost of having to, they spend 60–80% of their time raising money. They don't have time to legislate. They've got to make the money to be reelected the next time. And it's sad, and it doesn't have to be. And I hope anybody seeing this recording, if you can tell me why we can't levy on the stations for a portion of the people's airtime and return it to the people to be used for public service announcements, whether it's health, whether it's Smokey Bear, or during political campaigns, the airtime for candidates. I think we, simply by making that requirement of the TV stations, which are really a money tree. I don't know many, people talk about wealth, I don't know many impoverished TV station owners, and they're using what it belongs to the people. And I think the problem could be dealt with very easily. I offered to go to Washington and try to put together a group and draft the legislation, but no one's taken me up on it.
Bill, how do today's members of Congress compare with those of your time up there?
I'm 81 years old, and people that get my age historically have always said that times ain't like they used to be. Men ain't like they used to be. They don't grow them like that anymore. So there's a danger in thinking that things were always better, or better heretofore, but I think they were. I saw somebody sent me an email not long ago about pictures of the Depression, people walking up the road barefooted and people in shanties, and they were tough times. But I think that people's morals were better, that their sense of who they were and what they were doing and what they were about and what they wanted to achieve was completely different from what it is today. I don't think young people are spending 20, 30, 50 hours a week playing video games. We didn't see anything wrong with working. The younger generation's tired of hearing it, but my first job was 15 cents an hour. We've been indulged, and I think most people my age believe that we lived in the greatest times there ever were in the United States. Through the Depression, World War II, the height of American power, I don't think it'll ever be what it was. I don't come in the greatest generation. That was the Tom Brokaw dubbed them the World War II generation, but I came right behind it. And when I see binge drinking in colleges, when I see abortion on demand, when I see empty houses of worship, when I see rivers polluted and forests desecrated, I know in my mind, to my way of thinking, that things ain't as good as they used to be.
You think today's public officials are accessible enough to their constituents?
I think the arrogance of public officials is outrageous. And I think anyone seeing this video will agree with me. Yesterday I had to go to the post office to get a certified letter that I was not home to receive. I stood in line 35 minutes to be balked at when I got to the counter. May I help you, please? I see police officers. It ought to be building a bridge to a younger generation. They're not stormtroopers, but their arrogance, their sense of authority, their demands, their, you know it as well as I do. Charles Weltner was Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court briefly, and on the court for many years. He was a congressman. He wrote just before he died in the Atlanta Bar Journal, or Georgia Bar Journal, his regard for a section of the Georgia Constitution. And it's inspiring. Public officers are the trustees and servants of the people who are at all time amenable to them. I don't know who wrote that. It's the Constitution of Georgia, Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 1. I think this is deserving of being in the federal Constitution. I think it's deserving. I have wanted to get it hung, done in brass or bronze, and hung in every courthouse in the state of Georgia. Because we can't tolerate arrogance on the part of public officials. They aren't available. Have you been to the permit office in your town and city? A wall of thick glass, a speaker tube. You can't hear them, they can't hear you. We had a rule when I was in the Senate, when I was in Senator Russell's office, every letter we received was answered the day it was received. And Senator Russell spent 1 to 2 hours every night signing those letters and checking them and rejecting them if they didn't fit his views. I just don't think that public officials are accessible. I wish I thought they cared, but I don't believe many of them do. And that's particularly true in the offices. What did you do the last time you had to renew your driver's license? Or buy Christmas stamps this year? How long did you have to wait? When I was a boy, you went up to the counter, walked in the post office, put down 3 cents, got a 3-cent stamp, put it on the letter. 95% of the time it was going to be delivered today. Well, you know it as well as I do. Anyway, no, I don't think it's what it should be. I don't think it's the way it ought to be, the way people want it to be, the way... I just got back from Europe. I like to travel. I've been trying to learn how to do it on the cheap, and I've been to 108 countries of the world. I was just in Berlin last month. I flew out of LaGuardia. I flew into LaGuardia and out of JFK. Outmoded, run down, dirty, inaccessible buildings, insolent people. I went to Berlin. I went to Bulgaria. I went to Varna, Bulgaria. I wanted to see the Black Sea. I came back through Bosnia-Herzegovina, Sarajevo. I saw in Sarajevo, not the biggest shopping mall I ever saw, but the nicest, the best designed. Vienna, beautiful city, functional transit system, trains on time, courteous people at airports, helpful people on the street. And then to Berlin, by any standard, a magnificent city, joined together when the Soviets tried to make it where you couldn't join it together. The train station, 6 levels of glass, trains coming in on 4 levels, on time, people getting on and off the trains. Museums, architecturally impressive. A city that works. Have you been to New York lately? I don't know. Have you seen a picture of Hiroshima or Nagasaki? Rebuilt, beautiful, functional. Our infrastructure depleted, run down, officials insolent, indifferent, mean, spiteful, full of them own self. I wrote a letter to the 2 Georgia senators, and I wrote it to Senator Byrd, who I was associated with for many years. I went to Washington for the Obama inauguration. I drove there with on my 1996 S10 pickup truck because I took signs that I had with the Georgia injunction about public servants being, public officials being servants of the people and being amenable to them, and I wanted to give one to Senator Chambliss and Senator Isaacson. I was in Senator Isaacson's office 3 or 4 times after I delivered it when I first got there. I never got to see the assistant scheduler. All I ask is a chance to present the sign, to tell him that I thought it was deserving of being in the Constitution, that someone ought to introduce it, to try to call attention to the spiteful, hateful, indifferent nature of the people we are having to deal with. Senator Chambliss's office, his administrative assistant, someone that I had known previous time, told me that if I'd come back in the spring, he might be able to get me in. I spent an hour and 20 minutes with Senator Inouye, for whom I had worked. I took him an updated graph of the federal budget. Can you see the line way down here? It's out at the bottom here now. I don't know whether you'll indulge me, but since I didn't get to give Senator Byrd was too ill, he wasn't at the Senate, I couldn't see him. I couldn't approach either of our Georgia senators. It's not too long. Can I read it? Dear Senator Byrd, our once great country has come to a sad pass, and the hour is late and the laborers are few. But I feel we must do everything we can to mitigate the damage. The government is currently engaged in a wild, frantic, and I believe futile imbroglio, which I believe will certainly debase our currency, once sound as a dollar, to paper soon to be worthless. Countless government officials have been jailed or under indictment for crimes ranging from simple theft, pedophilia, and sodomy to high crimes and misdemeanors. Not only that, but today we learned that the man nominated to be in charge of collecting taxes has failed to pay his own. And he is to solve our financial dilemma? National opinion polls indicate the public's approval rating of the president is at 23%, the Congress 16%, and there is little reason to doubt the results. Crime is rampant, and education is on the rocks. Abortion mills abound and are flushing down the sewer the lives of precious children of God in numbers that would make Adolf Hitler quake. God has been relegated to the closet. The public cries out in vain for relief from burdensome taxes, and ridiculous and absurd government regulations stifle enterprise. Government workers are sequestered in a cocoon of perks and privileges, such as a heavily subsidized health system, which is the best that money can buy, and a pension which is guaranteed to increase by the annual amount equal to the cost of living, called COLAs, all courtesy of the beleaguered taxpayer who has none of these advantages. Arrogance abounds, contagious obscenity consumes, bad manners are common, licentious behavior is not only tolerated but revered, debauchery thrives. Virtue has been abandoned, and the old, tested old age lessons of prudence, modesty, restraint, and thrift have been forgotten from the courthouse to the White House. In short, Senator, the government struts while the people struggle. It may already be too late, but I feel we must try to mitigate the damage, and I have a suggestion as to how we might begin. Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution of Georgia reads as follows, the injunction that I told you about before. Public officers are the trustees and servants of the people and are at all times amenable to them. Senator, this is a standard to which we can and should repair and begin a healing and restoration of confidence in those in authority over us. Let me humbly ask you to submit this language as an amendment to the United States Constitution with the hope that it will become a beacon of the restoration of confidence and the beginning of a new day of hope. I don't know. When I couldn't, it wasn't acknowledged when I sent it to my representatives. It wasn't published in the paper to whom I sent it. So obviously not many people share my view, and I hope it's not as bad as I think it is. But I think we're in a sad, sad situation.
Tell us about the Jordan dollar certificate.
Well, like I was trying to come up with ways to focus attention on frugality, and I was once lecturing to a bureaucrat. I remember what it was. They came up with, it was the District of Columbia, and they had a plan, a new high school with escalators in it. I struck it out. I didn't think escalators ought to be in high schools. I thought students needed to climb the steps. They thought I was an old Scrooge. I was so mad, I hammered on my desk. I said, don't you know? There's not a dollar spent by this government that's not extracted from the pocket of some poor citizen. And I thought to myself, nobody was following me around, picking up my magic words and putting them to writing. So I decided I'd do it myself. And I came up with the idea, every dollar spent by this government comes from the pocket of a working American. Our challenge is to act as if it were our own. I watched them how they spent their own money. Prudently. I saw them when they were spending the government's money. Imprudently. And I thought if I could focus that, and when I would read in the paper of someone doing something to economize, something or paying attention and paying regard for taxpayer dollars, I would put this in an envelope and send it to them. And I had 500 printed. I've still got about 100 of them, and I've given groups of them to others that might find someone. I haven't given out one in a long time. But if we could get them to handle public money like they handle their own, when they're paying for the ticket, they fly tourist class. When the government paying for it, they at the front of the plane or have a private jet. So the government struts while the people struggle. And I think it's sad.
Let's get back to Bill Jordan. How has life been after retirement?
Life is full and busy. Having missed my goals, I have returned to endeavors to deal with my family. I have a daughter who is permanently and totally disabled by virtue of a drunk driver in Washington. I've lived with that for 34 years. I have a blind granddaughter. So my latter years have been trying to figure out a way that I can provide for them when this cataclysmic day that I think is coming comes. It's tough.
How often do you get back to Monticello?
Not as often as I like.
Has it changed?
Monticello's changed. I moved back. I had a beautiful antebellum house that belonged to my grandparents. I moved back, and when I'd go to town and look at the stock market, they wonder what I'm looking at those little numbers for. Things have changed. I say Monticello's changed, but maybe Bill Jordan's changed. In Washington, I was a regular Attila the Hun. I was always to the right of everybody in the room. I went back to Monticello. I was the leading liberal in town.
Politics have changed.
The world's changed. I've changed. And I don't know how much of it the world and how much of it's me. Do you?
I don't. But I do know this. The Bill Jordan I remember is the student who took on the city of Athens. Tell us about it.
The city of
Athens.
I thought we passed over that time in my life. I was a second-year law student. And the city of Athens levied on students to buy a $7 tag. The state statute said that they could compel the students to buy a tag while they were temporarily in Athens, but they could not charge for it, but they charged $7. I refused to pay for it. they sent a they sent a policeman. Here I am behind my fraternity house, some of my fraternity brothers. There's the policeman. He took me off to jail. I posted $9 bond, and I appeared the next week in the magistrate's court. I was a second-year law student. I thought I could argue my case. I quoted the law, and I gave a summation of the situation, and I knew that I was about to be rectified. It was to be rectified. I had asked for my $9, $7 bail to be returned. They had difficulty coming up with it, but they returned it to me on the spot. That angered the judge, angered the sheriff. Judge Price, he was a butcher, I think. Butcher in more ways than one. But he said, "That's all you got to say?" I said, "That's all, Your Honor. I sentence you to 7 days in the city stockade." I said, "Fine, Your Honor." They threw me in the paddy wagon with a couple of ladies of the night and a couple of drunks, and they took me out to the Athens City Jail. I knew that was a place I shouldn't be. But they threw me in the bullpen, and they found out I was a law student, and I was spared some of the indignities of the bullpen because I was there in my little cashmere sweater and my little fraternity pen, but I was a second-year law student, and I was expounding on the law. You would have thought I was Socrates sitting in the middle. And later in the afternoon, before dark came, I let some of my friends bail me out. But I guess I'm hard-headed.
Well, did you serve the 7 days?
No, I got out that afternoon. I was bailed out.
Bill, let's take a minute now to sort of rehash here. Would you like to talk about some of the other senators with whom you worked during your career in Washington? Those who made a mark on you?
I spent a remarkable time. I spent 28 years. I took early retirement when my daughter was injured and put her in the Rusk Institute in New York City, and but my time, 26 or 7 years in the Senate, a remarkable time. I don't think anybody could do it today. But the people I worked for were remarkable people. Men of honor, integrity, ability. They don't make, that's an old man story, I guess, they don't make men like they used to make. They don't make men like Dick Russell and Danny Norway, who lost an arm in northern Italy 2 weeks before the end of World War II, fighting with the 552nd Nici Regiment that couldn't be integrated into the regular army because they thought they would be disloyal. Won more campaign citations than any other unit in the United States Army. Bill Proxmire, very liberal man, but tight with the money. Interesting to know that Bill Proxmire went to Yale, and he went out for football, and the coach of the team was Gerald Ford. Interesting also to know that Hubert Humphrey, I think I'm right on this, went to pharmacy school in Louisiana and knew Russell Long when he was there. It's interesting how people's lives interlock. But John McClellan, men of conscience and ability and integrity, and I know they're there now. but we give them a task that they can't do. The corruption of money is insidious, it's ever present, and it's wrong. And the system won't get any better until we free the members of Congress from having to raise those sums of money, astronomical sums of money. Did I tell about how Senator Russell's campaign for the presidency? I told you about it earlier. Hope I don't repeat myself, but Senator Russell went to every one of the 159 counties when he ran for governor at 31 years old. He raised $7,000 and he borrowed $5,000 from the Citizens Bank in Winder. That was, what, $12,000. $12,000 then might have been like $5 million today, but anyway, I think we could do something about it. I wish we would. I hope we will. I thank you for your time. I thank you for an opportunity of venting myself when I haven't been heard anywhere.
Well, it's been an honor having you. I would like to say to you, Bill, that you certainly made a name for yourself in Washington. And a colleague of yours in the Senate, I think, summed it up very well. You've made your mark here, which many will emulate, few will equal, and none will excel. And I think that's absolutely right.
Well, those are high words of praise that I don't deserve, but I have the satisfaction of knowing that I did my best. And when you have that satisfaction, you can't worry about it too much.
That's all a person can do.
I appreciate the opportunity to add a postscript to my earlier comments. I know that people, most people, majority of the people, differ from me on, I realize what an arch conservative I am. I realize how little I think the federal government or the state government or the city government does well. I'm afraid to think about what emergency rooms of hospitals will be like 5 or 10 years from now. Or medical care will be 5 or 10 years from now. I mentioned that I traveled. I was in Luang Prabang. I had done a float down the Mekong River. I was in a computer shop. A computer place. And I need help. I asked this man on this side and the man on this side, and this guy was helping me a little bit more, and we fell in conversation, and he asked me, I asked him where he was staying, and he said he's staying 2 doors down the way. I said, how much you paying? He said he was paying $2.75 a night. No, he was paying $2.75. I said, well, I'm paying $3 1/4. People don't know how I can travel as much as I do. I don't stay in 5-star hotels. Anyway, it got on me that he would have a cheaper way than I did. I was sharing a room with 2 Germans. We'd gotten off the boat floating down the Mekong for 4 days. And we got to talking. And it was the strangest, most unusual friendship developed that you've ever heard of. Basit Chandri was 32. I was 73 years old. Basit Chandri had graduated summa cum laude from Columbia. I got through law school and passed the bar, but I had a better time than Basit, but I wasn't summa cum laude. Basit Chandri was to the left of Mao Tse-tung politically. I was to the right of Attila the Hun. Bussy Chondry was a devout Muslim, prayed 5 times a day. I'm a born-again Baptist. We had absolutely nothing in common. But he had never met a proud Georgia redneck, and I had never met a devout Muslim. And we both had enough intellectual curiosity to try to figure the other one out. And so it began to be a beginning of a wonderful friendship that I've now enjoyed for almost 10 years. He went his way. He was a medical doctor, by the way. He'd graduated second in his medical class at NYU Medical School. He had a grant from the Johnson & Johnson Foundation to study health care in America, and he borrowed the money to do a trip around the world before he settled down to his study. He went his way and I went mine. We kept in touch by email. And 2 years later, he paid me perhaps the greatest compliment that I have ever received. He called me up. He said, "Where are you going this year?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I've been everywhere I want to go. I'll find a place." He said, "You pick a place anywhere in the world that you want to go, and I want to go with you." Now, my grandchildren won't listen to me. This guy was pretty smart, and he wanted to spend time with me. A great compliment for an old man. Anyway, we picked Morocco. We spent 2 weeks in Morocco and camping out in the Sahara Desert, traveling around, going to different places. We flew to Paris. We had dinner with his beautiful girlfriend. I went on home. They stayed a few days in Paris. Kavita Patel was the daughter of an Indian immigrant. She had graduated from medical school in the University of Texas. Basit, by the way, was the son of a Pakistani engineer who had come to America in the 1950s. By the way, Basit's brother was leading the demonstration in Times Square against the Bush invasion of Iraq. At the time we met. Anyway, we were in Paris. He met his girlfriend, Kavita Patel. We kept in touch. I had dinner with him when I went to the Obama inaugural with my African-American friend from Monticello, driving up in my pickup truck. It turned out that Kavita Patel was in the back. They were both of a liberal bent, and they went to the Obama convention. Convention. And she was standing in the back of the room, Kavita was. And when you meet her, you realize she's smarter than Basit. And he's pretty smart. She was standing in the back of the room, and she falls in conversation with a man who's standing there. His name was Axelrod. And he realizes how this is a woman of ability. And when he gets to the White House, he takes on Kavita as his assistant. So you see how travel sometimes leads to interesting situations. But I started this off by saying that I enjoy people with different views from my views. I find them challenging. I find them sometimes inspirational. The most inspiring person that I think I've ever known is Max Cleland. Max and I have we've had endless conversations, and I don't remember ever having solidly agreed with Max. but he's one of my dear friends. I was the first person to take Max out of Walter Reed Hospital. He had to walk up a little board to get in my car. He later came to my office, which was in the Capitol overlooking the mall. He walked in there. He was perspiring. He was determined to walk, and he did. It wasn't practical for him to continue. And he's been severely restricted, as most everyone's aware. His interview with who's the man that interviews on cable?
Larry King.
Larry King was a compelling interview. I caught it by chance. I was inspired by it as anyone that sees it inspired. The courage, the determination of this man that lost triplegic, tragic accident of war. And I was so moved by it that I thought it ought to be in every VA hospital in America with all the boys coming back. Tom Johnson, a boy from Macon, Georgia, worked with the Macon paper for a while and later was with President Johnson in the White House and later the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, and came back here and was one of the president of
Turner Broadcasting. Turner Broadcasting.
Turner Broadcasting. We had known each other, and I wrote Tom a letter and told him if Ted Turner had any money that he wanted to do a good deed with, he'd put that in the, he would have that videotaped and put in every VA hospital in America. And so it was done. And so if I missed saying that was one of my proud achievements, it was. And I would like to salute Max, a very dear friend, but he knows and I know we are still searching for common ground.